In a survey from Nationwide Insurance, it shows that 75% of small businesses don't have a clearly defined disaster plan, and 40% of all businesses don't recover after a disaster if they're not prepared before one happens. This shocking statistic shows how important it is for businesses to have some sort of disaster plan in the case that an emergency does happen. Hello everyone, my name is Nicole Wagenseller and I'm going to be discussing a disaster plan for the company Intuit. So when planning ahead for disasters, this is a very important step to take because imagine being at work when a disaster strikes. You could feel unprepared, nervous, or even scared without knowing what steps to follow. Oftentimes, businesses find themselves disorganized during an emergency. Employees may also be distraught and they cannot find their way out of the building to safely evacuate. This is not a good scenario. The key is preparation. Planning ahead is essential to being able to recover from potentially disruptive events. It also keeps everyone safe. Risk management is an important part of each business, and knowing that there is some form of recovery helps eliminate the risks that the company may face. Next step is knowing the types of disasters in the area. Depending on your business and where you are located, you may be affected by different disasters. Intuit, since they are located in Southern California, may be affected by fires, floods, or even earthquakes. If you are in a different location, you may run into natural disasters such as hurricanes or man-made disasters such as chemical spills or workplace violence. The next step after knowing the types of disasters is alerting employees. This should be a main key for knowing all who are in present danger and allowing them to know that there is an emergency happening. Nancy Jackson, in her How to Create a Disaster Plan for Businesses, lists that communicating this is one of the key steps. The fundamental idea is that everyone that could be affected is warned in some way and then knows how to proceed further. For fires, it is important to have fire alarms inside and outside of all buildings. They should be distinctive and loud and be able to be heard by all who are working, even those with disabilities, meaning the alarm should be both heard and seen. Along with alarms, there should also be an intercom system or some way of communicating with all employees over a loudspeaker. That way, everyone in the building will know of the evacuation and can be advised to proceed further. Lastly, notifying managers is crucial because this will allow them to be informed about what is going on and make sure they can take appropriate actions. The evacuation plan. Having a plan of action is very helpful. There are conditions when an evacuation will be necessary. In each business, there should be somebody who is responsible for calling an evacuation. They should be clearly designated. If there is a large disaster, law enforcement or other officials may step in and evacuate the building before a disaster hits. Make sure to follow their orders directly. Lastly, an evacuation is necessary when the health and safety of those in the facility is at risk. There may also be situations when you would need to shelter in place. This is where situations where there may be a chemical or gas leak in another part of the building and you would need to evacuate to a separate side of the building. Another scenario could be a tornado, when sheltering in a designated place inside is the best idea. There could also be something dangerous outside, and staying inside would make sure that everyone is safe. The next step is establishing a chain of command. When evacuating, having someone in charge is always a good idea because it helps things flow. The person chosen as coordinator should be responsible, have leadership skills, and be able to carry out the plan of an evacuation. This person would then have authority over all other employees, and other employees should know who the person is that's in charge during a disaster. There should also be other employees that will work under the coordinator, such as evacuation wardens. These people are in charge of 20 people or less and will also help for those with disabilities. They can delegate people to stay with these employees at all times to make sure they are taken care of. Anyone who is helping out during an evacuation should have proper training to make sure they know how to properly hold their position. Specific evacuation procedures. Following a laid out evacuation procedure will make it easier for the company. Exits. Certain exits are deemed as emergency exits, and these will be used during an evacuation. They are labeled with a red exit as well as a direction indicating where the assembly area is. They should be well lit and placed in every location that is visible and show the nearest exit. It is important that these exits are not inside of restrooms, and windows should also never be designated as exits. Routes. As you can see in the picture below, there is a clearly designated diagram showing the evacuation route in each building. These should be labeled and posted. It is important that in these routes, they must be large enough for employees to pass through. You cannot have any evacuation route in a small space or going to a small area. Next, they must be clear and not have boxes or anything in the way of the path. In the picture, you will see that obviously the route is not clear, and this would not be a good example. Also, you should also know where the stairways are because there should be no elevator use during the time of an evacuation. Visitors should also be accounted for following an evacuation because they may need additional assistance. By having all visitors sign in when entering the workplace, you can use this list during an evacuation when accounting for all persons in the assembly area. These visitors should be accounted for by the evacuation wardens. They can also have someone designated to stay with them at all times. Those with disabilities are treated the same as visitors. They will have somebody with them at all times and can be helped out by the evacuation warden. Meeting locations. The place where all employees should gather in the case of an evacuation is called an assembly area. Depending on the emergency, the assembly area can be inside or outside. Everyone or all employees must know and come to this spot during an evacuation. It should have enough space for everybody. If the area located is inside, this is called an area of refuge. If the area is outside, it must be a spacious area. A good example is a parking lot. As you will see to the right, this would be an example of where you could go. It should also be an area that is away from danger, such as busy streets or highways. If there are employees still inside, there are often procedures to follow. Certain employees will have the responsibility of staying inside during an evacuation and shutting down equipment, but they must know when they must also evacuate. This is a good time for their training to come in. Also, for rescues, there may be instances where employees are still stuck inside, but rescue operations would be needed. Untrained individuals may endanger themselves by going back in, so since safety is a top priority, they would wait until special rescue forces come. Another thing that you would have to think about is accounting for your employees. Once you are in the area of evacuation, it is time for a head count. You need to identify the names and the last locations of those who are not accounted for. As we talked about before, having the list of sign-ins for non-employees will help you account for those who are visitors. If there is a further evacuation and the incident expands, this may consist of sending employees home. Lastly, there is a chance that you will need to use special equipment. Personal protective equipment may be used during an evacuation if there are potential hazards in the workplace. Some equipment could be masks or goggles, as you can see to the right. Other equipment includes respirators, and there are many different types. Each respirator should be certified by the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. The disaster plan only works and functions properly with plenty of practice and training. All of the employees and managers and those on the site should be educated about the work site and know the potential hazards. They should also be educated and trained on the plan, taking the time to go over each main heading and the types of disasters will allow them to know what to do if something were to happen. The next step is also to establish the chain of command and make sure everyone knows who is in charge. Practice, practice, practice. This will allow any actual emergency to run smoothly. The more you practice, the better the employees will get. Having drills will allow you to improve each time, and employees will feel more comfortable in these situations. Lastly, safety is number one. It is important to keep your employees as well as your business safe. People will work well and work better knowing that they are safe in case something such as an emergency or disaster happens. Having this organization from running through your plan will make it run very smooth. So now it's your job to go out and do it. Thank you.